Hello everyone, it's Vinny here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the two bosses that we're able to test for the very first time for the new patch for 9.1, right? These bosses were the Terragor and the Guardian of the first ones. In this video I'm going to be basically explaining what the bosses are and how well they are going to be for mages, or even if they're going to be good for mages, right? So that's basically what I try to bring over in this video. Keep in mind it's the very first iteration of the boss, right? Things are bound to change later on as we keep more tests going out, right? But that's just what I want to say at the beginning. So let's just start and talk about Guardian of the first ones first. Since the Terragor was supposed to be the very first boss, but after we accidentally pulled it, it didn't respawn anymore. So they gave us the Guardian of the first ones instead. So we're going to be talking about the Guardian of the first ones first. And like I said at the beginning, this is accordingly to the Dungeon Journal the 7th boss in this instance. And also the patchwork boss of this fight. So before I go over whether we are actually going to be like good on this boss as a mage, we're just going to be first talking about the mechanics that this boss has. Since that also will impact whether we're going to be playing a certain spec or not, I think. So the very first thing is, whenever the boss hits 0 energy, the Guardian pulses inflicting damage to all players every 5 seconds. And the damage is increased by 100% every single time it casts Purging Protocol. This is basically a soft enrage. If you do not handle this correctly, you will just, at the end, not being able to out-heal it anymore or out-defense it anymore, right? So you'll just die. So the one thing that tanks need to worry about is basically he does 2 smashes in a row, and the first smash applies a physical damage debuff, and the second strike deals a lot of physical damage, so they just need to target swapped hands, right? So it's not that difficult. Then these abilities are actually, what you need to do as ranged. Disintegration, the Guardian, basically shoots a line in front of him. What you need to do is legit just walk out, and that's it. If you get hit by it, you will get stunned, and it deals arcane damage every second for 6 seconds long. So it's basically 6 seconds stun. Just move out of it, and you're totally fine. Then the second one is basically the Form Sentry, which is hella annoying. Actually, I thought this was not going to be an issue, but it's basically a random thing that's just floating around the boss fight. There are always only 2, by the way, on Heroic. On Heroic, you only have 2 sentries floating around the boss room, but they are really random. And whenever you stand in it, it's also going to give you a debuff, where you're basically not allowed to cast anything. It's basically silence, but it also does sticking damage. So just make sure to stand out of it. And then the last ability that is happening on this boss fight is Threat Neutralization. This is basically, the Guardian will mark random players, 3 in total, with a big circle around them. They just need to walk out and make sure that no one else is standing in it, because it deals a lot of damage, and basically move out, and that's that. So those are actually the abilities of this boss. But how this boss actually plays out, right, is it has energy, and every second in the fight he loses that energy. And how to refill that energy is by pulling the boss to the energy course, so he can regain this energy. But whenever this happens, he's still doing all of his boss abilities, right? He's still going to do all of those abilities as well. But whenever he actually charges energy from those core, you're going to see a very big white circle on the ground where you need to stand in it. If you don't stand in it, it's basically, you will die, right? Because it's a very big dot that's just going on all around. And if you don't stand in it, it's going to hit even more. So in total, there are 3 cores in total. And you need to utilize, like really try to min-max these cores in order to actually be capable of killing the boss in time before the soft enrage of the Purging Protocol, right? Where it just keeps on doing the Purging Protocol over and over with increased damage. So actually by accident on the very last pull, we actually saw that the Purging Protocol stacks don't apply or don't stay, right? As in, we accidentally got the Purging Protocol before we went into the first pillar, into the first core, but he never got a stack. And this might be a way to actually tackle this boss later on if you don't have enough damage, that you do get a Purging Protocol and then you do the energy core. So you can actually just get a very big hit in, but just a little bit more DPS seconds as well, right? So we have 5 seconds more of DPS as well. So in the end, this boss is actually not that difficult at all. There's barely anything going on. So it's basically your typical patchwork fight. But I can definitely see this being a very tight DPS check / healing check. Well, not really healing check, actually. It's basically the usage of damage reduction. So you basically want to bring people that have damage reductions as a healer. Like Spirit Link, the aura from Holy Paladin, right? And also this priest is going to be amazing on this fight. Basically, the very big damage reduction cooldowns from healers. Those healers is what you want to bring on this fight. But for DPSers, there's not a lot going on. So, in total, I must say, I was quickly done with this boss, actually. Since there's not going on a lot. There's not a lot going on, right? So, yeah, that's basically the boss itself. But what about Mage? How is Mage performing on this boss? So, I think you can play either Arcane or Fire on this boss. Just looking on how everything is going to scale, right? So, we were able to actually pick all of the conduits, right? All of the conduits and also the soul binds to the max. That's, yeah. But basically, I think you're going to be playing either Fire or Arcane on this boss fight, since if you play around it correctly as Arcane, you can stand still a lot of times. And even with the nurse as Fire, every single time I got my combustion in like 1 minute 10, something like that. And I'm still doing good damage while playing Fire. And this is also without me being able to use my weak cards where I keep track of all of my things. If I disc one arrow commands, my Ionic Skate, they were a lot more difficult to track on the PTR than when I actually play live. So, I really think you're going to be playing either Fire or Arcane, because it's a pure single target boss fight, and Frost sadly isn't still up to par with the single target damage of either Fire and Arcane. But that's basically what I think about the Guardian of the First Ones. Just a quick summarize, right? It's a patchwork boss fight. There are like 3 mechanics that you need to deal with in total. And it's full single target. So yeah, that's basically the very first time. So let's hope, I really hope that they're still going to be changing this boss a bit more to make it more involved to do as well as a DPS, really. Alright, since we're done now with the Guardians of the First Ones, we're going to be talking about the Terragor. Like I said before as well, this is going to be the very first boss in this instance. And it has actually something very interesting, since you're going to be able to use anima powers during this boss fight. Not class-specific ones, though. They are actually specifically designed for the boss. Like, they are actually powers that already exist in Torghast, which you kind of want to utilize on this boss fight itself. So, there are 4 ads before you even start this boss fight that you want to kill in order to claim 4 powers everyone, right? So you can claim 4 powers. And if you don't like them, you can actually go to a pillar, unlearn them, and then take the powers again. And they're different every single time. So yeah, have fun having a 30-minute break while people pick their exact powers that they want in order to get their 99 locks, right? Or 100 locks. So that's already going to be a fun thing. And I really think this is going to be changed. Like, it's too RNG at the moment. But before I go too into the anima powers, we're going to be talking about the boss abilities first. Because there are anima powers that you want to take in order to tackle certain boss mechanics, or just completely negate them. So, let's do that first. So, you guys probably know who this guy is, right? It's the guy that follows you around in Torghast whenever you fail a run. So, this time we are here to beat him, right? So, the very first thing is a ability that the tanks need to worry about. It's called Overpower. It basically is the Terragor slams its targets, it inflicts X amount of physical damage, and it stuns the target for 4 seconds, and it also applies a debuff. Debuff is basically increased physical damage taken by 200% for 20 seconds. The second one is the Chains of Eternity. It's basically someone gets a chain, like they get an arrow above them, and someone needs to block it in order to make sure that they don't get gripped into the boss and immediately die, right? Since it is going to be a spectral chain which is going to focus on the player. After 8 seconds, the chains fly forward and stun the first target struck, inflicting 50 physical damage and pulling them towards their death. And yeah, if you get caught by this, it's just guaranteed that you're not going to survive this. So you need to tackle this ability by taking an anima power that makes you take, yeah, way less damage, right? Because of it. The other ability that's going to be happening is Predator's Howl. The Terragor holds, causing an aura of dread to form around players for 21 seconds. This causes each target to radiate unshakable dread every 3 seconds. This is basically an ability that healers can dispel, since people get a purple circle around them, which is basically 5 yards, and if you walk into another person's circle, they're going to be feared for 8 seconds long. Healers need to make sure to dispel this ability in order to, yeah, just tackle it, because later on into the fight, we need to go into certain patches where you need to all stack up in order to not get feared away into the bad shit and you will die. Again, there's an enema power for this to completely negate it, so you're immune to fear. So you can have like a group already standing on a position where they can just use mass dispel or something to just immediately, yeah, remove all of those stacks in one go, right? So yeah. And this is then the ability where the Predator's Howl need to be removed before this happens, right? It's gonna be called Hungry's Mist. Basically, this ability looks pretty cool, actually. Like, the very first time I saw it, I was, like, actually amazed. It looks pretty cool. It is... The Terror Core dissolves into the mist of Thorghest, forming several images. These images erupt and inflict one-shot, basically, to all players within 25 yards. But there's also going to be a safe zone where you need to move very fast towards, right? You actually don't have time to chill. You actually need to immediately move, because if you don't, you're capable of just, yeah, not getting there in time. Again, there's an enema power to completely negate this as well, where you're going to be taking 90% less damage from area of effects. So you can take all of these powers together and basically ignore the entire fight almost. So that's something as well. So also, the Remnants of the Forgotten Torments is basically a soak mechanic that you need to do. The Jailer calls down the memory of the Forgotten Torment, which assaults players until it is absorbed. So these are actually powers, like the negative debuff that you actually have in Thorghest as well. So the very first debuff is the Remnant's Upper Reaches Might. So whenever you get this, it's... The might of the upper reaches increases physical damage done by the Jailer's forces by 50%. A player may lessen this effect by absorbing some of the torment that causes the player to take 10% increased physical damage for 10 minutes afterwards, right? So if you don't soak it, the boss is doing 50% more physical damage, and if the tank that is tanking at that point has crushed armor, which is increasing their physical damage taken by 200% as well, they will die. They will just die. So the second remnant is the Mortar Guard's Echoes. The Mortar Guard's Echoes increases magic damage done by the Jailer, forced by 50% as well. And again, players need to soak this in order to lessen the effect. And whenever you soak this, the player will take 10% increased magic damage for 10 minutes afterward. It says it's 10 minutes on Wowhead, but while testing, it's only 3 minutes actually. So maybe for Mythic itself, it's going to be 10 minutes. So you actually need to make sure that everyone's soaked here and there. Or you need to make sure that like you have one person going full defense mode with all the anima powers and just soak every single time. If he dies, you just battle res him and he just keeps on doing that, right? So if that DPS is not an issue, third tank, baby, let's go. No, JK. Alright, so the third one is going to be the Remnant, the Soulforge Heat. Soulforge Heat periodically inflicts fire damage to all players. And again, whenever a player soaks this one, it causes the player to take X amount of fire damage every 5 seconds for 10 minutes long as well. What you can also do is let one person like rotate people with immunities. Since what you can actually do is go in, go out, so until you soaked all 5 of them. Use Ice Block and completely remove all of the negative effects. So that is something that you can do as well. So maybe you want to run a couple of immunity classes like Hunter, Mages, in order to actually just remove this. Or you take maybe someone that goes full defensive mode with anima powers and just let them soak all the time. If he dies, unlucky, right? You just battle res him and you go again with that player. So the next one is going to be basically a dot that the healers to also do and the spell round. Is the grasp of that. The Jailer's grasp tightens around the player, inflicting a shit ton of shadow damage actually. Inflicts 14k shadow damage every 2 seconds for 40 seconds. This dot hurts a lot. It actually hurts a shit ton, dude, and it actually lasts for so long. So again, the healers need to make sure to dispel this whenever they can. Same thing with the Predator's Howl, right? They need to make sure to get dispelled, basically, because if you don't, it's going to be a total shit show at some point. So this one, I don't exactly know how it works, because sometimes we accidentally removed it, and sometimes it just didn't get removed at all. It's Fury of the Ages. Basically, Echoing Rage fills the caster, increases damage by 25% and haste by 25% for 30 seconds. I've actually no clue what this does. Sometimes someone said, hey, I did, or like, I don't know, it was really weird while testing. I myself actually didn't really see it at all, but I just heard it from the Discord people that I were playing with. That sometimes, I don't know, man. Actually really weird. Sadly, this is the final part. We didn't manage to get here ourselves. This is going to be the Jailer's Gaze. Basically, whenever the boss hits 10%, the Terror Core calls out the Jailer. He will remove all anima powers from all the players and grants the Terragor an additional 500% damage on until it dies. This is on normal, mythic, and heroic, right? So I'm pretty sure what you want to do on this boss is save Bloodlust until the very end. And whenever you get close, so you're going to be able to kill the boss within 40 seconds, use Bloodlust in order to just kill or be killed, basically. I must say, this boss is pretty interesting for a first boss, since there's so many things that you can just negate or just totally ignore if you take the correct anima powers. But you can also go full offensive mode by taking only DPS anima powers, because holy shit, some of them are broken. Like, we had a Feral Druid dude bursting for like almost 50k DPS, because he only got DPS like powers, right? But at the same time, there are also other anima powers which actually int your group. Basically, you gain size and DPS, but if someone gets close to you, you will knock them back. We had someone take this, and whenever Hungry Mist was going on, they actually started knocking people into the bad shit, and they were going to start dying, right? So if you take that power, you kind of need to take the one that you also take 90% less AoE damage, so you can just stand on your own and just fuck off in the corner and just do your own thing. So now, what about how is this boss going to do as a mage? I think, again, we're going to be playing fire on this one. Mainly because at the very last percentage, it's going to be kill or be killed. Or you need to save your cooldowns as Arcane to really start pumping down there as well. But since it's going to be mainly about execution, since that's what, yeah, mainly is going to be the most difficult part, right? Whenever it goes below 10%, you want to burst it down. So it's going to be the execution part that's going to be very important. And against, even though after the nerfs, fire are really good at executioning, because of the X Scorch, right? That Scorch always will crit and also increase damage. So that's going to be very good. But I must say, I think you can pick any mage spec on this boss, since one, it's the first boss. Second, there are anima powers that can actually just make you do the damage for you until it hits the 10% damage remaining. But I must say, myself, I actually had quite fun on this boss. Because there's actually quite some things. Like, this boss is like a single target boss as well. But there's way more going on than the Guardian of the first ones, which is going to be the staff boss in the instance. And I was actually, every single time we were pulling this boss, I was actually trying to help the team out, right? Because there were things that you can do in order to help your team out. While on the Guardians of the first ones, just like, okay, move out, move in, get damaged, you soak it. Like, you don't get damaged by it, right? And yeah, the Terragor just looked more fun. Like, yeah, that's the correct word. It looked more fun to do as a DPS, right? But then again, I must say, I'm pretty sure this boss is not going to be accounted towards logs about your all-stars points. Since if you go and take full damage anima powers, you're going to be way stronger than someone that's also actually going to take a couple of defensive ones to help out the team, right? Instead of going full out on the offensive ones. So yeah, that's basically the Terragor boss fight, and yeah, it's a pretty interesting boss fight. So to just summarize things up, right? So we tested the Guardian of the first ones, which is, and the Terragor. Both are just patchwork bosses. They're single target bosses where not a whole lot goes on, especially on the Guardian. I hope they actually going to tune a bit more, like actually get another mechanic in there to make people do more things during the boss fight, because it felt like I was just DPSing the target dummy, really. The Terragor itself is actually a pretty cool first boss, and I think it's actually going to be one of the better first bosses, especially if they're going to tune down the anima powers a little bit more. And with the testing that we did, right, they got more info and intel on what they want to do. So I have high hopes for the first boss, because I think it's going to be very fun. But then again, the anima powers can either break or make this fight. So it will all come down on that as well. But what do I think we're going to play as a mage on these two bosses? I think for the first boss, you can play whatever, right? Since even if you play Frost, you don't have the execution, but your single target damage as a Frost mage, when you're playing Ventier, is not bad at all, dude. Like, you're actually doing quite some damage. Same thing with Arcane. Arcane actually does a lot of DPS, but the issue is, with the Terragor, there's actually going to be quite some movement involved as well. And with the history of we playing Arcane, right? Movement is bad, right? You just want to move as less as possible, but sometimes you just have to move, and you cannot really do anything about it unless you get the power that you can just completely negate the Hungering Mist, so you can just stand still basically 90% of this boss fight, and then if you get that power, Arcane is going to be really amazing, I feel like. But in the end, for Terragor, I still think we're going to be playing Fire, just because of the last ability that I mentioned, is whenever it goes below 10% health, that he will do increased damage and also remove all enemy powers. And Fire Mage's having the best execute out of all of the 3 mage specs, or having at least any execute damage. I think we're still going to be playing Fire on this boss, even though after all, like, the nerfs that we managed to get, right? Because we're just back in Thone, right? We were getting out of hand, but now we're just back in Thone. So that's fine. But what about the Guardian of the First Ones? I think on the Guardian of the First Ones, again, you can play basically any spec. But since Execute is also going to be quite important on that boss, because, again, it has a soft enrage, and if you don't do enough damage, you're just going to die, right? Because of the mechanic that the boss itself has, where you're going to keep getting Purging Protocols over and over. But maybe actually Frost Arcane can actually really pump as well here. With Arcane, if you pre-plan your movement, you barely have to move actually. Because the main part about this, if you stand on a good spot, you're not that close to other party members. You can basically stand still so long on this boss fight as well. And then you just need to blink once or twice the spec right now. Because, to be fair, mages, the mage spec at the moment are all really close together. And I actually can't wait to test more to see which spec we're actually going to be playing the most. Because right now we were only capable of testing 2 bosses. And I really want to start seeing the other bosses where we're also going to be seeing ads and everything. And how that will impact the choice which we're going to be taking, right? Since if there are going to be a lot of ads with perma ads up, Frost is going to be amazing. So yeah. But anyway, those were the very 2 bosses. Bye bye.